Hello and welcome to the continuous hinge installation webinar. This is presented by Winton. That is me. I am an ALOA certified instructor, certification. This presentation is sponsored or put on by wayneslockshop.com and Wayne's Lock Shop Productions. That is my hosting company. We come up with new ways and innovative ways how to do the locksmith trade and jobs throughout the locksmith industry. Everything is copyrighted, all rights reserved, text, video, and photos. You can use the information in here and share it with others. We just want you to get it in writing first, or at least ask permission. I also don't want to see any of this stuff show up on the internet without permission for public consumption. So if you could please just shoot me an email, tricountylocksmithservice@gmail.com, or find me on social media and shoot me a message. That's no problem. We can definitely, if you need to help your buddy out, we have no problem with that at all. Okay. This is also, Wayne's Lock Shop is also the largest online locksmith video collection dedicated to the further education of professional locksmiths. So if you're interested in the videos that you see today, you're going to see short little snippets. This whole seminar is going to be a big, long recording, and you can actually watch the individual videos over at wayneslockshop.com. So shouldn't have too much of an issue right now, but if we were in class or in person or even in webinar format, please put your phones on vibrate. If you need to talk, take the call outside. Feel free to take pictures if you want to go ahead and do that. Once again, just make sure that you get permission if you want to share that with somebody else. So we're going to go into some learning information, okay? Simply by listening to a class, you're probably only going to retain about 20% of the information that you get. If you take notes, write things down, you're going to increase your retention to about 50%. If you get involved, take notes, engage, ask questions, that kind of stuff, you're going to skyrocket to about the 90 percentile rate. If you can actually do this, like if you're training in-house right now and you actually take these steps and you're actually doing it physically on a door, that's even going to make it go up even higher. You paid for the classes, you might as well get the most out of it. Webinars are going to work better with a clean, solid connection. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you have a Ethernet port to your computer, if you're taking this on a computer, that's going to be the best way to get the most out of it. You're going to have a lot of high definition photos and videos and a lot of other things going on. So I just want to give a shout out to ALOA and SAFTA. If you are part of an association, that's great. We highly encourage making sure that you are a part of a bigger organization that can fight for your rights and that you can help influence as well. If you're not exactly satisfied with the current way that an association is running, being it national, worldwide, local, town, state, whatever association you are a part of, you can actually volunteer and you can actually get elected onto the board and you can be that change that you want to see. So rather than reinventing the wheel, go ahead and get involved and get your ideas put out there for that association to try and take advantage of if they can use those ideas that you have to share. One really, really important thing about doing storefront work, and especially hinges, is making sure you leave your mark. You're going to get so much more business. I cannot tell you how much business I get from putting stickers on the door. And one of their stickers, they actually have some aluminum, like metal stickers, is actually part of one of the repairs. When we pull top pivot off, when we undo those 3 screws and we pull that top pivot off, we actually put a sticker right there and it covers the hole. So it does a really, really good job. Giving push-pull indicators or directional indicators is always a good thing to do. It just helps out the customer. It helps out the person using the door, and it helps you get that phone call back if they have a problem with it in the future. Just because we do a continuous hinge doesn't mean that they're not going to need their locks rekeyed or anything else that can happen. So we'll also go over some GKL Hinge Doctor demonstrations in the second part. This is part 1. This is about 2 hours, hopefully maybe a little bit less. We're going to try and keep it in that 2-hour mark. but there will be a demonstration in the second portion of the class so that you can see how to fix butt hinges for a temporary time until you can get a better solution like a continuous hinge on that door. All right, so what is a continuous hinge and how does it work? This type of hinge is also known as a piano hinge, okay? It runs the entire length of the door, panel, or box, okay? And this is a definition that we just pulled off the internet here. Continuous hinges are manufactured without holes in most cases. So that means that it's going to be continuous from one end to the bottom. It's not going to have a gap in it. Not meaning the holes doesn't mean the holes that you actually attach the hinge with. Obviously, it has those pre-drilled. The hinges also come in various thicknesses, pin diameters, and knuckle lengths. So we want to solve the problem here, not extend it. We want to put money towards fixing the actual door or fixing the actual problem. Not towards fixing a problem that will fail again. If you look over here, how much did this $25 butt hinge really cost this customer? I mean, really, if we have 3 different service calls here and it's still not fixed, I know my minimum service call rate is probably $104 to $148. And that's now in 2022, it's going to go up from there, obviously. So you're already going to have $300 or $400 just in basic repairs, and that's just a service call. That's not labor or anything else to try and replace it. So you can see that they tried to use some oversized screws. When that didn't work, they tried to weld it. And of course, that little tiny patch of weld isn't going to hold anything. Then they use even longer screws. They re-drill some spots right here to add some screws. And none of this worked because they didn't actually solve the real problem, which is throwing this butt hinge in the garbage and actually mounting a continuous hinge. Okay. So for what they paid, my normal service call and hourly rate, my minimum to go out is going to be a service call and an hour labor. And that's going to be at least $200, usually $250 to do that. So if we've got 3 trips, we've spent $750 and we have not solved the problem yet. We could have done this with 1 trip, used a continuous hinge, and actually solved the problem for less than what they spent on all this nonsense. Choosing the correct hinge for your application is going to be your keys to success. So we want to identify the door. What types of doors is this going to work on? Hollow metal doors, aluminum storefront doors are going to be most common, wood fire doors, and other oversized doors. This is going to work great on. We also have to know how to sell the repair. Before you can install the hinge, you actually need to sell the repair. So you're going to have to show the customer how bad their door actually is. And this is a real life story. I was literally just this week on yesterday, I was out and I was doing a safe combination change and service for the customer safe. I walked in, I noticed their door was sagging really bad and it was barely hanging on by a thread. So while I'm working on the safe, when I get done, we close the transaction and close the deal. And I tell them, I said, hey, just so you guys know, I'm not trying to hustle up any more work. I'm more than thankful that we were able to get the work that we could get done here for you. But just so you know, I would like you to look at your door because I really think it's a hazard and I think somebody could get hurt if this thing is not addressed, and if it falls through, and then the door could literally quite fall off the frame and fall right off the hinges. But there was the pin maybe had a 1/16 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch barely hanging on, and the bottom's dragging on the bottom. And I pick that door up and I shake it and I show them, and that pin's wobbling back and forth big time. Big time. Okay. And when that happens, they see that and they go, oh my goodness, it's like a big red flag, big red alarm. Wow, this is really bad. We should really take care of that. And I explained to them, I'm telling you because I didn't want anything bad to happen. I don't want it to be a liability for you or your business. And I'm actually showing genuine concern for my customer and for their customers that are actually walking in and out the door so that nobody gets hurt. A couple things will happen after this. They'll say, yeah, we got a maintenance guy to take care of that. or they'll say, oh my gosh, please come out and service it right away. And then that's what happened with this particular one. And that's what happens most of the time when they ask, well, do you do that? And I'll say, yeah, we do that. Sure, we can get you scheduled right away, and that's what happened. The other thing they could do is say, well, maybe we'll have to run it by management or whatever. And that's okay too. But either way, you're showing them something that they need to address, and keeping public safety in mind is my number one goal, whether I get the job or not. They could hire somebody else. I tell them, you can hire somebody else to do it if you want, but yes, we do those, and here's my cost, and et cetera, et cetera. You literally just you lift up on the door and show them how loose the door is. And then you show them the gap between the door and the frame, and show them that it's barely hanging on by a thread, and they'll quickly realize. I also have this little video that shows what that looks like as we do that demonstration. Alrighty, good morning. This is Wayne with Wayne'sLockShop.com, and today we're going to be repairing these doors. You can see, first of all, we've got some major problems here, and the pivots are pretty much completely worn out. You can see how much they move. Bad times. Pivots are worn out here. Concealed mounted closer in the floor. So it's not a center hung closer, it's in the floor. We're actually going to be putting all of this stuff on continuous hinge, getting rid of all of this garbage, and mounting conventional closers inside here. So that's what it looks like from the inside. Got this little bar to contend with. And then on the outside. Let's see how off that is. Not gonna last much longer. So you can see how that pin is really just barely hanging on. It's flopping around like crazy in there. Huh? Yeah, go ahead. Shake it. Oh yeah. You can see that bushing and everything. So this door is literally about to fall on somebody, and we're gonna get it all fixed up for them. Stay tuned. Okay, so now you get there's really literally not very much holding this on anymore. I can literally almost stick my finger in there. There's just a tiny little bit. When I see this, I see green, I see money, I see an opportunity. Okay. The other one you'll see is the bottom pivot broken like this here. You can see this bottom pivot's completely broken, and it's not even hanging on to anything at all. It's just literally just flapping around in the wind. So we look at the top and we look at the bottom. This is what you're going to look for with bad butt hinges. So pivot hinges are going to be more of a aluminum storefront problem, and butt hinges are going to be more of a hollow metal door and wood door problem. You can see that we've got darn near 3/4 inch gap, at least 1/2 inch, darn near 3/4 inch gap on this one right here. And the story behind this goes that they've hired contractors and door guys and door companies and all kinds of people, and they keep replacing the hinges, and they hinge doctor them, and they do all these different things to them. And every year they have the same problem. This is a very high frequency use, oversized door that's on a frequently used hotel. And it's probably one of the most used doors in the whole city. And the main thing is they just keep replacing these hinges. And then every year they got to come back and they got a problem again. The door's not shutting, et cetera, et cetera. I told them that I would be able to fix this one time and offer them a personal 3-year guarantee, not going through Select Hinge. Select Hinge offers their lifetime warranty, but I told them I personally will guarantee this fix and this repair for 3 years through my company. You have a problem, we'll come out, we'll fix it, no charge to you. Okay. That also led to thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of work, because here we are 5 years later and this door still works perfectly fine. Okay. So now that you know what to look for, and now that we've sold the hinge, now we can actually prepare for the job, and we can get the tools gathered that we need to go ahead and do this. Drill or impact driver is going to be required. Drill bits, airbags, automatic punch, step bit, wrench, hammer, mallet or dead blow hammer, pry bar, screwdrivers, Allen wrenches, a block of wood, shims, and a chisel are going to be good things to have with you. We may need a few other tools. You may come up with a couple tools that you personally choose to have, or you may have some that you choose to delete off of this list, but this is my list and this is how we get started. The other thing we want to stress is one trip, one bag, more profit. Okay. So one thing that I like to stress to people is you running back and forth to the van doesn't make you any money. That actually costs you a lot of money. Okay. So every time you go back to the van, if you want to break yourself of the habit of going back to the van, throw a $5 bill or a $20 bill in the van every time you have to go back to it to go get more tools. And that's how much money you're losing on that job. Okay. You can actually be putting that money back into your pocket by not going back and forth so much. So I have one trip, one bag, one time, ready to go. This is my continuous hinge bag. It's got all my wrenches. It's got all my airbags. I grab my tools that I need. I put my tools in there and we're done. Okay. We're all set and ready to go. Don't forget that coffee cup, because that's probably one of the most important tools for getting going in the morning. And a little water for later, if you will. But you can see we're all cordless tools. We got the hinge over here, screw pack, hinges laid out, bags all ready to go. This is how you get set up for a job. We also wanted to go over the personal protective equipment, or PPE. This is going to include gloves, eye protection, hearing protection, caution cones, caution tape, anything to protect you or the public from the work area. Anything your company or OSHA requires for safety equipment to do your job at your location. So the other thing we want to keep in mind is if I'm on a new construction site or a remodel site and the contractor has brought me in, or even the customers brought me in to redo this door, I am still going to be compliant with all of the rules and regulations of that job, and that the permit was used to pull that job. So that means if OSHA is on site and they're a safety inspection company, you can get dinged too. Okay. So look up your OSHA requirements for construction and everything like that. You might have to wear a hard hat, orange vest. You know, I'm all cordless, so I don't care about, I don't really carry extension cords, but if you do, you want to make sure that they're new, that they're not all frayed. There's gaps, the holes, pinches, crinkles, all that kind of stuff in there. Can't have any of that. Okay. But other than that, making sure your personal protection equipment is ready to go. Face shields, anything you think you need, earplugs, ear protection, any of that kind of stuff, make sure you have it to do this job, because we're going to be working with power tools and they will hurt you if you're not paying attention. We've got additional equipment. If you're going to be doing the cut the hinges off method, you'll need an angle grinder. As a backup, I've got a Sawzall with the Diablo carbide blade that's used to help cut the hinges as well when the angle grinder doesn't work. Then you've got PPE, gloves, safety glasses, etc., and of course, caution tape and cones. There's also some instances here where this is why we don't really replace pivot hinges anymore. 2 weeks after replacing the pivot hinges on this location, the bottom pivot broke and the door fell off. This is a huge liability, and it just so happened that I got very, very lucky on this job. It wasn't an installation error. I didn't do anything wrong. There wasn't anything wrong with the product or with the hinge. What happened was we had a soft base, and when you'll see this later, I'll actually show a photo of it, but the wood underneath where that pivot, it needed its support, was rotted away. And so it didn't have any support. So it was just trying to basically just hang out there and be a lever and carry the weight of this entire door on this one little tiny pivot, because the top doesn't carry any weight. It just keeps the door from tipping over. So a couple of weeks later, it broke, and yep, I ended up having to give them a continuous hinge for free. It solved the problem, and I haven't done any pivot hinges ever since. Excuse me. And you can also see, this is another good reason why replacing pivots is just not a good idea. Okay, we put this brand new pivot hinge on here, and look, we've got cracks in the door. This is on the door side. And you can see right here, here's the wood over here. So what happened is this wood kind of was really spongy and just kind of rotten over here. And so when we applied that pressure to it, it just snapped the pivot right back here. And that was it. That's all she wrote. It fell down. Okay. Luckily, the door closer held it in place. I was able to get back out there. I was able to get it fixed, and nobody was hurt or injured. So I got very lucky, but I also learned from it. We're going to take a look at a way like the conventional method for installing the continuous hinge. So when I built this class, I actually worked with Steve from Select Hinge Continuous Hinge, and that's what we're going to be installing today. I wanted to make sure that my class was on the same level with his vision of his company and make sure that we're installing it correctly and that all the information that I'm giving you out today is correct. And so Steve has seen this class, he has seen this method, and you know, he was participating and approved of the method as well. He actually kind of liked it and thought it was a pretty good idea. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to gather all your tools. You're going to check the box, make sure that you have the correct hinge and the correct parts, remove the existing hinges, butt hinges or pivot hinges, remove the door closer, and you're actually going to set the door down. Now, I said this is Select Hinge's way of doing it. I'm going to show you their way of doing it because there are going to be instances where you do have to drop the door. You can't always pin the door in place. A couple examples are an interior door. Okay. You're not going to be able to run a grinder to cut the hinges in half and utilize the techniques that I demonstrate indoors. You're not going to be able to put those sparks and make that smoke and do all that stuff inside, especially if you're doing butt hinges. It creates a lot of sparks. You're going to damage flooring, and it's going to be very dangerous to be running this kind of equipment indoors. You could set off a sprinkler system and cause a flood, causing hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars worth of damage. Okay. So you don't want to do that. Then we're going to prep the opening, make sure that the opening is healthy. We're going to reinstall the door in the opening. We're going to add 1/8 inch shims to the door to create an even gap. So that's going to be, you want an 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch of reveal all around the opening side of the door. So if this top of the door goes this way, the hinges are over here. You want to see about an 1/8 of an inch to a 1/16 of an inch all the way around that door, nice and tight. Okay. Then you're going to inflate the bags to hold up the door in place. And we're going to cut the hinge to the exact measurement of the door. Then we're going to fasten the hinge to the frame side with self-tapping screws. We're going to fasten the hinge to the door using the round self-tapping screws. So you're going to have panhead screws and you're going to have tapered screws. Tapered screws go on the hinge side. Panhead screws go on the door side. Now, this is the point where you're going to check and test the door. You're not actually going to put the through bolts through yet. We want to test the door because once we put the through bolts through, that's it. It's game over. You're not really going to have a whole lot of movement after that. Okay. So you're going to release the airbags and shims to check the swing and the alignment of the door. If the door needs to be adjusted or needs any adjustments, go ahead and do them now. Now's the time to realign and reinstall the self-tappers until the door swings correctly. Once you have that done, now we can drill the through bolts. You can use a 3/8 drill to drill those through bolts through. And that'll be the way how to do that. Then you're going to determine the secure side of the door, and you're going to install the through bolts and make sure that the ribs grab for easy installation. You're going to place the round caps on the secure side of the door, meaning that if you are on the locking side of the door, the round caps need to be facing you. Okay. That way somebody can't come up with the screwdriver and just take the bolts off and pull the door off. Okay. People ask, well, can't you do that if they undo the self-tapping screws? They can, but they have to pull a non-removable cap off. It's very difficult to remove that cap, and you can't really put it back on. It's going to be definitely some significant, you're going to notice some significant damage or something's happened to that actual door before you do that. Couple things to think about is if you're going to be on a law enforcement correctional facility or a rehab center or anything like that, and you need it to be secure on both sides, you can alternate the screws as you put them down, the through bolts as you put them in. Okay. Round head on one side, round head on the other. That way it's secure from both sides and nobody can just come up with a screwdriver and just pull them all off. Okay. Then we're going to go up the side of the door. We're going to use a probe to make sure that all the bolts are straight and lined up correctly. We're going to install the Phillips head part of the through bolt in the hole that we just made. Then we're going to remove the airbags and shims, check the door, and make sure that it swings properly. We're going to then reinstall the door closer, and you're going to be done. It's going to be that easy. Okay. Here is the continuous hinge installation video for a conventional installation. We'll watch the whole video, and please write down any questions that you have, and I will answer those questions at the end.
This presentation will walk you through the installation of a select SL57 full-surface geared continuous hinge. You'll see how a select hinge takes no longer to install than a butt or pivot hinge, but saves you time and hassle, eliminating repairs down the road. First, you'll see how to position the door and hinge. Then you'll see how to attach the hinge to the frame and door. And finally, to ensure the door swings properly. Remember to always follow proper safety precautions when using power tools and wear safety glasses when appropriate. First, remove the installation instructions and fastener packet. Make sure to save the instructions and read them carefully before beginning. The fastener packet will contain shoulder screws, center punches, barrel nuts, self-drilling, self-threading door screws, and self-drilling, self-threading frame screws. Step 1. Remove the existing door. Start by removing any door closers. Remove the old butt hinges from the door. Make sure to use the correct size head for the screws. Screws may have rusted or corroded over time and may be hard to remove. Remove the door from the opening. Next, lay the door down on the hinge box to protect the door from damage. Then remove the remaining butt hinges. Step 2. Fit the door to the opening. First, place the door back into the opening to check the fit. Next, shim the door to align it correctly in the opening, starting with the shims at the bottom. Place the remaining shims so that you have a 1/8 inch gap on the latch and top sides. If you have the proper gap, the frame doesn't need to be square. Step 3. Prepare the hinge. There are 3 set screws on the side of the door side hinge leaf. Start by loosening these 3 set screws on the door side cover with a 5/64 inch Allen wrench. Be careful not to back them out all the way. They can fall out and be difficult to find. After loosening the set screws, remove the door side cover. Then remove the frame side leaf cover, which is not attached to the hinge. Step 4. Attach the hinge to the frame. First, align the hinge with the top of the door and center it on the frame. You can move the hinge horizontally to align it with any brick or molding, even if it's not square. Be sure that a minimum of 7/8 inch of the frame leaf is applied to the frame of the door. The gear cap doesn't have to be centered on the gap, and the door and hinge don't need to be perfectly level. Next, mark the drill holes. It is recommended that you mark the top 4 holes. Drive in the top frame screw with a Phillips drive before putting on the hinge. You may need a stepladder, especially if you're doing it alone. Remove the screw, then hold the hinge in place and drive in the top screw. Next, install the other frame screws. Notice that there are 4 holes for the door screws. These will hold the door in place until you install the security fasteners. Next, install the 4 door screws. Step 5, check the door swing. After removing the shims, check to see that the door swings freely and closes properly. If you need to adjust the swing, remove the door screws, reshim the door, and drill new screw holes through the hinge door leaf. Remember that once the hinge is installed, the door will settle about 1/16 of an inch. Step 6, install the security fasteners. First, replace the shims in the latch side gap to keep the door closed while installing the screws. Make sure to install the fasteners properly. The rounded head of the barrel nut should face the side of the door you want to make tamper resistant. The head of the shoulder screw should face the other side. Next, drill holes in the door with a 3/8 inch bit for the barrel nuts. Make sure to keep the drill level. Then tap in the barrel nuts with a rubber mallet. Don't worry if they don't go all the way in. They'll pull in when you install the screws from the other side. Finally, install all the shoulder screws on the other side of the door. The final step is to install the hinge leaf covers. First, install the frame side cover, which is non-removable. Tap it into place with a rubber mallet or use a wood shim with a regular hammer. Next, install the door side cover, which is removable in case you want to install a new door in the same frame in the future. Place the cover, snap it into place, and tighten the 3 set screws. Finally, reinstall any door closers. Your Select SL57 hinge is now installed, and your door is ready for a lifetime of use. Unmatched durability, covered by the industry's only continuous warranty. Select Hinges.
All right, so that's Select Hinges' way of doing it. I have done it that way, and it does work, but I also wanted to incorporate, we've got some really, really heavy doors out there. And I also had some female employees that were working for me that were very, very small people. I mean, we're talking, they probably don't weigh, but 80 or 90 pounds. They're not going to be able to, the door weighs more than they do, for crying out loud. They're not going to be able to manhandle that door. So that's why I came up with this method. There's also a lot of single man operators and single women operators out there that are just one-man shows, and they don't have an additional set of hands to help install these doors. Well, and take them off and set them down. Well, an oversized door, which is going to be your prime candidate, you're not going to be able to do that alone. You're going to have to bring somebody with you. So what I wanted to do, what my mission was, what I set out to do, was to make this a 1-person, 1 hour or less installation. And here's how I did that. And the biggest problem with the installation is the part where you take the door down. So I removed that from the equation. So this is the reason I show that video, is because if you're inside and you can't use the angle grinders and you can't cut the hinges off, you're going to have to use that method. If you're doing this on a center hung door that pivots both ways, and you're eliminating that center hung function, and you're actually changing the function of the door to an outswing only, that also, again, is not going to work very well. So you will have some instances where you have to drop the door. However, I came up with this new method to make sure that you could utilize the leverage and the tools that we have to not have to drop the door in most cases. Some of the hazards when dropping the door include the chance of scratching or damaging the door, breaking the glass, damage to surrounding areas, including other glass panels or anything like that. The wind can blow the door over. I've literally almost had a door be blown over after it was leaning up against the side of a building. Customers can both damage the door by knocking it over or getting entangled with it. You got kids and pets and all kinds of different stuff around the work area. That is all a recipe for disaster and a recipe for liability, both towards you and the building that you're on. So You also got to watch your back and your body. Doing that big, heavy twist, boy, that's not good on the back. So I came up with a different way to make sure that we can address all of these issues so that we don't have to drop the door. Installing the hinge without removing the door. I've never seen anybody else do this before, so I'm just going to refer to it as my method, the Winton method. It's pretty much the same without dropping the door, and there's a different way to get rid of the hinges. So we're going to check the tool, and we're going to check for tools and parts checklist. Do this before starting the job. You want to make sure that you have the correct hinge. You have all of your tools in one bag and one trip, one time, keeping money in your business. You're going to set all your tools out and confirm that you have the correct hinge. Okay. There's reasons why I keep saying that. You have to make sure you have the correct hinge. Okay. This is Wayne here with Trey County Locksmith Service, and today we're going to be doing the select hinge, continuous hinge. I'm going to show you how to do this without ever having to pull the door. You can make this a one-man job. You're not going to have to pull the door, but we'll go over the basics first. Last time we tried to do this, they sent the wrong hinge. It was a supplier issue. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you open the box before you do anything, and make sure that you have the correct hinge in the correct color and finish that you ordered. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck. Last time we cut the hinges off, had the door undone, and then looked in the box only to find that they set a offset pivot hinge, which would not work and be compliant with this. The door would only open about 30 degrees. So then we had a problem. The door is half hung. Luckily, we had an extra spare continuous hinge. We had to paint it, and it was a little bit short, but we made it work. So today we're going to make sure that everything is perfect and everything is fine before we even get started. And then we're going to come over here. We're going to pin this door in place using airbags. We're going to lock the door to keep people from coming in and out of here for safety. You also notice that we have caution tape set up. If you can set up caution tape, that's going to be a great idea. We're going to be using grinders, saws, machinery, tools, things that are going to throw metal and aluminum. So you want to keep the public away from you. We're going to basically pin this door up. You can see the difference here. We've got much more droop and sag here than here. This door's already been done. We're going to be doing this one today. Pin this door up in the upright position, shim it into place, cut the hinge, drill the bolts, bolts are going to drop down. We're going to pull the bolts out. That's a very important step, because otherwise they're going to be in there trapped and they're going to grind and bind, and bad things are going to happen. So we're going to have to pull all those bolts out of the bottom, make sure you get all four, and then we're going to mount the new continuous hinge, surface mount, screw it into place, and be done. This should be a one-man job, about an hour. So thanks for watching. Stay tuned. All righty. Okay, so as we do this and move forward, the importance of triple checking the parts. Why do I keep mentioning this? To make sure that you have the correct hinge. As I mentioned in the video, the supplier sent me the wrong one on one occasion when we did the other door. I had already had the hinges cut off before I checked the box. That's my fault, my error. I take responsibility for that, and it's never going to happen again. Did the supplier mess up too? Yes, they did. But it's still my responsibility. Had I checked the hinge before, then I wouldn't have cut the hinge and we wouldn't have got into the bind that we were in. So luckily, I had another hinge on the truck. I was able to reattach the door, but I did have to paint it, and I was not very happy about that. You'll notice when we get done with that, there's two different colors of paint on there. We had to paint that one hinge, or that was the one and only option. Okay, I live in a rural area. I can't go down to a supplier and just pick up a new hinge. It has to be mailed. Leaving the door cut off and unattached on City Hall is not acceptable either. Okay. You can't count on the suppliers to send the correct parts all the time. So make sure that you make it your responsibility. Then you won't get put in the pickle that I was in. Okay. Here we have the job site again. We've got the hinge laid out. I've got the bolt pack here. I've got the hinge laid out here. It is not offset. It's a complete surface mount SL57 in brown finish or Duranotic. That's all good news. Make sure that you and your work area are safe. Using grinders, drills, and saws, it's a good idea to protect the public. Flying metal and aluminum is no joke. It's dangerous, both to you and the people, children, and pets around you, okay? I highly recommend using caution tape to rope off your work area or orange cones. Even if you drop the door, keep the customers away from the door in the work area. So here you go. You see we got our caution tape lined out. People are going to give us a nice big wide berth. If they come up over here, we got to tell them to go somewhere else. Okay, can't come in this way. You can read this. This is, if you're wondering about the dangers of angle grinders, it is one of the most dangerous tools in the workplace. It's high RPMs and very devastating. An extremely useful tool, but very devastating. So if you're familiar, or if you're not familiar with the dangers of it, you can read this over at blog. You can read it on this blog page with angle grinders and safety. Okay, just do a quick Google search. Here we are back to the bag. One trip, one bag. That's it. One time. Trips to the truck cost time and money. Get organized. Get a bag of everything that you need and get it all put together, all nice and tidy. Okay, that's going to be a big, huge tip all the time. The Select Hinge SL57 is one of the most popular hinges they sell. This is the bronze version. They also have a clear or aluminum version. You're also going to want to check the parts list, empty the bolt bag, and make sure that you have all the correct parts. You can actually, I've gotten these before where just the bolt kit was missing, okay? It's just stapled inside the box. So during shipping, if it gets damaged, if you get significant damage on that end, that little bolt pack can pop out. You could also, they might not have put it in there from the factory, okay? It's possible. It's just human error. A person or a machine puts them in there, okay? There's a chance they can come out. So make sure you have the correct hinge. Make sure that you visually verify it's the correct hinge, not just look on the label, and make sure that you have a bolt pack. A tech tip is to always make sure you have a complete extra set of both aluminum and Duranautic screws on the truck at all times in case you do lose the bolt pack. It'll give you extras if you need them. And if one doesn't show up with one, you don't have to cancel your call for that day. You can continue on with your day. You just need to, reorder. I actually have 5 or 6 bolt packs now because we do so many of them. So you're going to lay out the hinge and inspect it for damage. See if it's bent, see if it's missing any pieces, missing cover caps, screw kits, anything like that. Okay. That one looks good to go. Support and lock the door if possible. Gap tolerances around the door should be typically between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch to allow for the door to close without binding on the jambs, but rest easily on the door stop. Okay. We got a couple of videos to take a look at here. All right, first step's going to be to put your airbags in the bottom right here. I like to have 2 airbags. That way it lifts up really evenly. If you put just one, it's going to kind of veer off to one side or the other. Place your shims up here, just like so. They're nice and tight. And then these shims suck it up against the wall over there. All right. Here we see the gap is much more even and uniform now. All right, I'm going to try and get you as up close and personal as we get into this. What happened there? Here we see the gap is much more even and uniform now. All right, I'm going to try and get you as up close and personal as we get into this. First step, we're going to be doing continuous hinge. We did that side. Now we're going to do this side. So the first step is to get your airbags in. I always use the strongest bag on the hinge side since it's going to be the most difficult to require the most power to push up. This side's going to go over here. So, okay. We got our wedges. So you want it to be right on that edge. Up there, so I can still come in with the angle grinder and cut it here. How far wedges are gone. I'm going to lock the bolts in place so nobody comes storming through. Place. Yep. Here. Lace them equally. Can't really go anywhere. Shape test. We're going to go ahead and start cutting on that hinge. Okay. Alrighty. So now we're getting the job set up and you can visually see how we're setting those shims in place. Make sure you have a little shim on the back side of the door too, in between. So on the hinge side, either you can use some thicker tape or you can use just a tiny little piece of shim, just a 1/16 of an inch or less, just to make sure there's no binding. If you don't shim the back side where you're getting ready to put the hinge, then you could have a problem with that door creating a bind later. Okay. Once we put the through bolts through and this thing is not moving or going anywhere whatsoever. So you're going to have to make sure you have all the tolerances ready before you get this thing bolted on there. Problems. So the door's already been pinned in place. I pin the door in place using the airbags and I lock the door in place if possible, just to prevent anybody from walking through, because once you cut the hinges, there is nothing holding the door except for the pressure of the airbags and the wedges holding the proper revealed gap all the way around. Very important to make sure that you keep both yourself and the public safe. Notice that when I'm standing on the ladder or standing down low, if somebody were to come and push on that door, it would immediately fall and topple on top of me or somebody else. Those wedges hold the door in place pretty well and pretty securely. However, if somebody came out and gave the door a good shove, it would definitely move. So right now we've got the hinge cut and I'm actually installing the continuous hinge at this point in time, putting all the self-tapping screws in. I have a leaf blower or an air blower. I like to keep my work area nice and clean. And as you're drilling into the aluminum, it's going to make a bunch of shards that will end up in your knees, hands, and other parts of your body. So I like to keep most of that stuff blown away off into the brush, away from the work area. If you can run a vacuum, that's even better. However, running a vacuum outside can prove to be difficult sometimes. Now we're on the inside, fastening the okay, so that's going to be setting up the door with your shims. Here's some photographic images so you can see exactly what we're doing. Notice I want that shim right alongside this edge, or I want it right alongside this edge here. Notice how this shim is placed right here where those two pieces of metal come together. There's a reason for that. It's so your hinge or so your shim doesn't just dip down into the pocket there and not properly shim the door all the way across. Where those sections come together, there's a piece that actually sits and that shim kind of sits on top of it. Okay, so it can't dive down. So that's why we're doing it. So you want to set the shim here, here, and here. Okay. Now we've got the airbags under the door. Lift the door up. I usually actually put my power bag over here, the bigger bag, but it doesn't matter. You're going to get it picked up off the ground either way. This is also an airbag in the open side of the door. I'll actually mount that a little bit higher. And when you're mounting those airbags in there, you'll probably need your door's probably already sagging. That's why you're there. So I open up the door, or I'll have a screwdriver or something to create a little bit of room to slide those bags underneath, or open up the door a little bit, slide the bag underneath the door where you have a gap, and then close the bag into the threshold with the door. I cannot stress safety enough. Always use a guard on your angle grinder. Proper rated and correct size blades and discs for the task. I use thin metal cutting blades. Now, when you have those thin metal cutting blades, if you have any kind of twist or buck or, any kind of deflection in those, they will come apart and they will explode into your face. It is not a good time. So you really have to make sure full face shield, safety glasses, hat, something to protect your head, and having that guard on there. Beware of fire and smoke hazards associated with the angle grinder. That is why this is an outdoor exterior option only. You cannot do the hinge cutting method inside. You will set off smoke alarms. You will cause damage to the floor. You will possibly hurt people. There's a lot of things that can go wrong if you choose to do that. So I highly suggest not doing that. External doors only. Right? Yeah, external option only. Safety glasses and full face shield, gloves, and flame retardant clothing are recommended. We're going to have a very graphic video picture to show you next. If you don't like to see bloody, gory, graphic images, then feel free to look away. However, it was one of these type of photos that actually got my attention, because I used to be one of those people that didn't use the guard, didn't pay attention to all the safety requirements, never had an incident. I figured, what the heck, it's never going to happen to me. Well, guess what? After I had one of my safety classes, they showed some of these pictures of what will actually happen to your face if a disc explodes, and it is not pretty. This grabbed my attention. I'm hoping it'll grab yours. This picture really got me to understand the importance of safety equipment. So I'm going to give you a 10-second warning. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you don't want to see the photo, look away now. Okay, there's two different photos in two different situations. 6-inch disc and a 4-inch disc lodged into their faces. Okay, big, tough guys, right? Not so big and tough when we've got an angle grinder blade stuck in your face. This is what happens if you don't wear your safety equipment. This is what happens when you don't use the guard on your angle grinder. Okay, sorry, I apologize for that. I just have to really hit it home. Don't take the guard off your angle grinder. And use a face shield. I would really highly recommend a face shield. Okay, so we're going to cut the top hinge using the angle grinder, and we're going to cut it straight down the middle like so. Now you'll notice there's some cut and scar marks on this door. Don't worry, all that stuff's going to get covered up. It's not going to be a problem. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start cutting on that hinge. Okay. Safety glasses. We'll be using the angle grinder. I'm trying to get as close as I can without ruining the camera or my phone, because the sparks do cause damage to the phone. The new one to the phone doing so. So you can see right now we're cutting aluminum, no sparks. That's a good thing. And you will be able to tell I kind of score it so it helps feed that blade along that straight line. Being very straight and dead center is going to be key. Also setting up your shims. You see that the dust is not sparking because you're just cutting into the aluminum. A respirator or a mask would probably be really helpful too. I always try and add things to each one of these programs as we put them together, but a respirator, a painter's mask, any kind of mask will help you from breathing in this aluminum too. That's no good for you to breathe. As we get deeper into it, now you can see some of the red hot sparks. Now you know you're getting into the pin, a hardened pin, a raise, and some of the other components of that particular pivot hinge. You can see all of the debris flying around everywhere using a respirator, a mask, along with safety equipment, safety glasses. All that stuff is going to be an absolute must and priority when doing these jobs. You need to make sure that you protect yourself and the environment around you. Now that we've got a fairly decent score on it, we'll try and crack it with that screwdriver. Pop, one end cracks just like so. And just get the other one off until it breaks off. If it doesn't break off right away, you can always rescore it, recut it however you need to, if it's not perfectly down the center, and get the desired result. Here we are, we're having to score it a little bit more. No foul in that. You'll notice I'm using an 18-volt grinder. One of the advantages of using this 18-volt grinder, this is a 6-inch 18-volt grinder. It can be done with the 4-inch. I have done it with the 4-inch. This just provides a little bit more horsepower behind the tool and the machine. Also, one of the really big reasons that I use this, other than convenience, is that the electronic grinders, corded power grinders, will spin 10 to 13,000 RPM, some even faster. This particular grinder only spins about 8,000 RPM. So in the event of a blade breaking or sparks flying or something bad happening, this one will be a much less violent event, whereas the faster the RPMs, the more violent that event is going to be. When a disc comes undone, it definitely wreaks havoc on any and everything around it without mercy. Now, check the top pivot on the top portion of the pivot to be broken as well. You could leave this in and unscrew it from the inside, but that's going to be up to you. Right now, we're probably punching the bolts back in. So usually when you cut this, the bolts will still be hanging on, the bolts that attach the pivot in. Okay, so hopefully we all understand. You're going to chop into that top pivot hinge like so. You're going to stab a screwdriver or a bar or something in there, wiggle back and forth. You don't have to cut it all the way through. You just need to cut it most of the way through. If you get 90% of the way through, or maybe even 85%, you can crack the rest of it open. That's what happens with that aluminum. Here's two different style hinges. We've got that round one, and then this is more of the octagon shaped one. Notice we cut right through the top and the bottom portions. And then when we knock that piece out of the way, you've got your screws or your bolts right here. Those will just go inside the door and fall right out when we're done. Again, cut it straight down the middle. Okay, crack it in half. Cut down here. We cut through that bearing or race at the bottom as well. It'll cut right to it. It's an angle grinder. It's not going to hurt anything. Here's a different looking one over here, or maybe that's this one after we got the bearing out of the way. Yes, it's the same one. We got the bearing out of the way. You can see where the cut goes. Cut, pry away, shove the bolts in the hole. Once you open the door, we'll create a larger hole so that we can pull all of the bolts back out. Okay, so originally I had cut the hinges, like if this was the hinge and I'm the door, I would come into it this way and cut them this way, okay? And then you could see the bolts and you could drill them out and it would work too. This way just works a lot faster. If the pivot hinge is here, you're coming at it straight on and you're going to cut it directly in half, just like you saw in the past video here, okay? The reason I call it my new method is because when I built this class, it was my new method at that time. This will be the middle pivot hinge. So one different little technique with this is coming in at this angle from the side. You need to get rid of that and make that flat on the frame. You're not going to be able to open the door until the job is done. So making sure that this has a perfectly flat surface when you're done cutting. Notice I'm scoring it down the side where I want it to be flat. And then I'm also cutting it directly down the middle again so that it can crack in half just like an A. Sparks. Move that into the pin, into the pedal looking, and flip it. Battery powered. So right there, and I'll probably explain it in the video too, but the way that it just locked and kind of bound up and grabbed that blade, had we been using a plug-in grinder or something that's got more horsepower and torque to it, that could have possibly broken that blade and sent shrapnel flying everywhere. Okay. This is why I like the 18-volt Milwaukee tools, or just any cordless angle grinder. It's going to have less RPM. You're looking at about 7,000 to 8,000 RPM versus 10 to 13,000 on a plug-in unit. It's also just got less torque because it is battery powered, so that if you do hold it real solid and it gets in a bind, the machine will stop. It won't break the blade quite as easily. If you're going to bind, you say a bind right there instead of breaking or splitting. If you're using a corded unit, there is a good chance that that could have possibly broken or destroyed that blade right then and there, and you could have had a catastrophic failure. However, we did not, because it is the 18-volt version, cordless version. Just give it a couple thumps with a hammer, a good heavy-duty screwdriver. Always use a heavy-duty screwdriver. There we go. Clean break. Nice clean break. That's the middle hinge that we're doing as well. So it's going to be a little different to cut. Now we just need to take the two screws out, and that metal piece will fall off. Then we'll have to grind that portion that is attached to the frame. Impact makes quick work of that, and then we'll go ahead and grind and make sure that we have a flat surface to work on. Frames up. There we have it. Well, flat. Again, all of this is going to be covered in under the hinge that we're going to bolt. Okay, so I'm showing several different hinges and hinge styles here so that you can see different ways that you can cut them and get rid of them in the field. This right here, this was my old way of doing it. I just throw a couple pictures up here just so you can kind of see how my brain was working. But before, I used to cut them this way rather than straight down the middle. But I found that cutting straight down the middle is a far more effective way of doing it. Once you cut it this way, you could then use a drill and drill those screws out. Again, we eliminated several steps. My whole point and focus on education is doing the job right, doing it as good and safely and quality as we possibly can. Okay, do a quality professional job first, then how do we make it faster? So I made it faster by noticing the problem. The problem was dropping the door and making it a two-person job. Now I've eliminated that by cutting the hinge and being able to remove it from the outside. It just works a lot better if you cut it this way. Okay, then you can drill those out. I just show this just in case you run into one and it doesn't work the other way. You still have this option. You can see we just use the drill right there. But if you cut it straight down the middle, you can eliminate this step. All right, so for the bottom hinge removal, we've got rid of the top hinge, we got rid of the middle hinge, and now we can go down to the bottom hinge. This is going to demonstrate how the bolts are located and how to drill them out flawlessly. This concept for drilling the screws came from a deadbolt. When done correctly, the holes are exposed. Oh, I'm sorry. This is actually for this method right here. So you can do this on the bottom pivot as well. And what I'm talking about is it exposes the holes like this, and then you can drill them out. But if you can still do the bottom pivot with the center cut method. Okay. Let's see here. Once we get the bottom pivot out of the way, we will have a video on that as well. You'll also need to remove this little stud. A 5/8 inch wrench will remove that stud for you in most cases. Here is actually the bottom pivot removal here. So this is what we had meant by that previous slide, is we would actually, you cut it straight down the middle like so. You're going to see your screws again. You're going to cut through the race right there. It's going to be the exact same thing as the top and the middle hinge. Put your screwdriver in, pop it out of the way, shove the bolts in, and you're good to go. This is split down the middle method. You can see we cut right through those bolts and everything. Okay, screwdriver pops it right in half, and that's it. Okay, and then here's that little stud. You have to get rid of that little stud or it'll hang you up. All right, so now we're gonna have to get the bolts out. We can either use a step bit to open up the bottom hole, or we can use a hole saw. Either way, you got to get a large enough hole, 1-inch hole saw or the step bit, to be able to retrieve the remnants of the bolts that you drilled out. This is an important, crucial part of the installation. Make sure you get the same number of bolt heads out that you drilled or pushed into the door. Now is the time. This will not be an option after the hinge is installed. Technically, I have had to do this after the fact. It just wasn't very fun and it didn't leave the door very pretty. But if you forget this step, I had an employee do this and they forgot this particular step, and we were trying to test the door and the door kept binding and crunching and grinding and we couldn't figure out why. I then asked, did we pull all of the bolts out? And they said, no, we forgot to do that step. So with the door open, you can open up the door on the back side of the thin side of the door. You can drill a hole in there and you can retrieve the bolt heads out that way if you haven't done too much damage yet. All right, now we're going to use a step bit to enlarge the hole so that we can pull all the bolts out. Go ahead. Is that about what the other one was? All we need is enough. All we need is to be able to get that out of there.
Yeah, that should be plenty. Maybe a little bigger.
Okay. And then all that other stuff is going to get boogered up. Make sure we pull one. Keep them all together. Pull that trash out of there. Spider webs. Rat's nest.
Pay extra for door cleaning service.
Internal door cleaning service. Here, maybe. Oh, is that two?
Yep.
Two. You can bend that however you need to. Three. So you can see that these would go down in there and bind everything. And there's four, right? So you want to make sure you have four. Leave that right there for a picture. Click. All right. Make sure we pull all these out. Cool. So now that we've got those out of the way, you can see here, I usually do duplicates. I do a little video and a screenshot. That way, when this information is actually put out, if you have step-by-step slides on your phone, you can see the visual pictures. If I'm teaching this class and for some reason we don't have a Wi-Fi connection, there's a lot of times where you run into a lot of problems at a hotel where you can't get on the online and the videos don't play. I still have a visual aid to show you what I'm trying to do. Okay, so there's the step bit method and there is the hole saw method. Either one of these, the hinge is going to cover this hole up. And because it's at the bottom of the door, it's not actually going to cause any structural damage to anything. Okay, you can see all those bolts that we pushed down inside there. All we got to do is fish them out and you're good to go. All right, so for getting the bolts out of the door, you'll just use a flexible magnet to pull all of the bolts and washers out of the door. After the hinge is put on, this will no longer be an option. Technically it is, but it's not an ideal option. Last thing you want to do is leave there and have to drill a great big giant hole in their door to be able to get that stuff out of there. It's not going to make you look very competent or professional. Make sure you pull out all of the bolts that you drilled. This will cause major problems if not done now. The hinge cover holes, or the hinge will cover the holes when installed. So it's not going to be seen. It's not structurally damaging anything unless you got into something like a structural part of the door. But I've never seen that happen in the hundreds or thousands of these that we've done.
Side door out of the way, didn't have to uproot the threshold, didn't have to uproot anything. Did it all externally, with the door pinned in place. And we're attempting to remove that backing plate. It takes a little messing with to get it out of there, but between a screwdriver and a good pair of vice grips, it'll come right out. In this method, this is where the 3-bolt actually provides some options and actually works in your favor, as there's already a nice big chunk missing out of the bottom of the door. Free to pull all the bolts, backing, plates, and anything else, nuts, anything that's in that door that you pulled out of there or cut. Like pulling out now, it's usually always a nice rat's nest, a couple spiders, and the rest of your parts. This is all very, very important to get out of there. If you do not have that third hole, then you would need to drill it. I like to use a multi-tool. Go ahead and cut this.
Okay, so that one, we didn't have to actually cut or drill anything into the door. It already had a hole built into it from where the hinge went. So that's even nicer. It's already right there. All you got to do is pull that little backing plate out and then fish all the other bolts and everything out of there. Very, very nice installation. Very, very nice way to be able to pull that out of there. Nice when we run across that stuff. Here's what it looks like when we don't have that option. You can see the hole right here, little magnet, fish all the stuff out. Everything's good to go. A lot of times your threshold will actually end kind of like right here. And if it does that, then you can usually, it drops down significantly. When you open the door, that stuff can fall down in there too. But in this case scenario, if we didn't pull these out right now, that would cause a huge problem. All right, so removing the bottom pivot. A wrench is used to remove the bottom pivot stud extended from the hinge. Here's a tech tip. Gear wrench is always a wise investment and will be a huge time saver. Sometimes if they're being stubborn, you can soak the bottom pivot in penetrating oil. It can help the removal process. Stubborn pivots can be broken at the mounting plate as well. Use a hammer, punch, and or Dremel tool or angle grinder to score it. I will show you all of those different options here.
To the door and the bottom top pivot hinge. This would be the most difficult one to cut, as it has the most steel. It has a pivot race bearing that is hardened steel, and there's much more spark when you're cutting this one, and there's much more chance of breaking the blade or gouging into the flooring or concrete. Those are all definitely things you need to keep in consideration. Again, look at all the sparks and smoke that's coming off. That's why this is an exterior only option. Cannot do this inside. You have a chance of setting off smoke alarms, smoke detectors, fire sprinkler systems. You definitely ruin any kind of flooring, tile, any flooring would absolutely be ruined by that. And you need to make sure that this is an external only option. Here, hammer, screwdriver, crack that pivot right in half. There it goes. See the different construction of it there, and you can see that bearing and that race at the bottom. Smacks with a hammer. We'll have the rest of it out of the way. Probably going to be a little warm. Watch your hands. I recommend gloves. Pop the bearing and race off of the bottom pivot. Sometimes they're intact, sometimes they're blown out. Go ahead and get more. Let's go those screws. And we'll pop that again. The rest of it off. Hammer and screwdriver. Strips. Yep.
So you'll notice the triangulation point of this pivot hinge. We've got the majority of it out of the way. However, it is triangulated. You've got a bolt here and here, and then we've got one over here. I believe, I haven't seen the back side of it just yet, but I believe we've got one here and here. So you can see how this method would work for either one. Now we've just scored it this way. All we got to do is make it enough so we can hit it with the hammer and crack that rest of that aluminum off of there.
Environment. Any pry bar would also be ideal in this particular situation. Getting those last little chunks off. It is a lot easier when it's just a 2-bolt pivot. Do that. This method definitely goes just 3-bolt pivot. So we're just going to score that one. I believe I'm scoring the bottom pivot now. You score that properly, make a nice even score on it, and smack it real good with a hammer, and cast aluminum will snap. Just like so. Now it's nice and clean, out of the way. Didn't have to uproot the threshold, didn't have to uproot anything. Did it all externally with the door.
Okay, so you can see how to get that bottom pivot out of your way again. Okay, you can just completely score it right there, smack it with a hammer. That cast aluminum will break pretty easily and it'll just fall right out of the way. It'll look like it's supposed to be that way. Don't bother tearing up the threshold and everything else. That's just going to be a nightmare. So here we go, removing the bottom pivot bolts, pull everything out of the door, snap that bottom piece off. You can see it's got a real nice clean break right there. Easy peasy. Now we're going to have to cut the hinge to size. We've got the original hinges off the door, which is a good thing. Now we're going to have to cut the hinge to size to be able to fit the door, okay? You're going to measure the hinge to fit the door exactly as fit or slightly less. It's better to have a little less than too much, okay? You're going to measure twice and cut once. Be aware of the bearing in the hinge. There are 2 of them. There's 2 Allen head bearings. I will show you where they're at in this video. The Milwaukee 18-volt cordless 7 1/4 inch circular saw combined with or paired with the Diablo Steel Demon blade is going to make easy, effortlessly cutting of these hinges. That's going to be clean. It'll look like it's practically machined that way. Okay, if you cut them with an angle grinder or a hacksaw or something, you're going to get a pretty rough edge. So this is a 18-volt Milwaukee portable saw. It's going to be a cutoff saw, 7 1/2 inch blade or 7 1/4, whatever the standard is, 7 1/4. But we're going to have the Steel Demon Diablo blade. That's going to be the ticket. That's going to let us cut metal, steel, aluminum, wood, whatever we come into, wood with nails, and it's going to make a nice clean cut for this. The one thing you really need to remember with these continuous hinges is that if you're going to cut past a bearing, see how there's this little guy right here with this Allen head screw? See that? If you cut anywhere past here, you need to take this part and move that bearing on down the line. It's interchangeable, but you've got 2 of them, okay? We've got 1 and 2. Make sure that you never cut past that or you move it. You can move it, all right? But I mean, if you cut here and here, that's going to give you, I mean, there's not very many doors shorter than that. The only time they do that is when they put them on a bathroom stall. So just so you know, but that is ultra uber important. You cannot cut past that guy right there. So go ahead, and where's your line at? Okay. You're going to want to watch the blade. But anyway, okay. Clean cut, perfect. Let's get this one a little bit closer to here because it's gonna want to vibrate because it's not as thick and sturdy. Watch the blade through the hole there. how nice and clean that cuts it, right? If you cut it with an angle grinder, you're gonna get all kinds of metal like burrs, and it's gonna kind of melt it as it goes through. That steel demon makes a nice clean cut, and it'll do that same thing with steel of any kind. Also, normally, I think it was just a simple mistake by my employee here, but normally we would leave that other cover cap. See how this cover cap is installed and left on the hinge? Just simply leave that on there, and then you only have one cut and you only have to measure one time. Nice clean cut, professional, no scarring or burrs. Looks like we're supposed to be here. If you do have any scarring or burrs, a little quick rub with a file or any kind of file or rasp or something for aluminum, we'll just take those little bits off of there. Okay. We'll explain a little bit more about that bearing. If you don't, the first time you cut one of these hinges, when you cut that cut piece, the piece that you cut off, it'll fall apart into all these individual pieces. The gear and this portion that holds it together with this little pin barrel thing right here, and this gear will all separate from each other. That's what that little Allen head wrench and that little Allen head screw does, is it binds everything together so that they can't slip. It interlocks the hinge together. That's why you can't cut past it. Identifying the Allen nut and the bearing, making sure not to cut past this. I believe when I talked to Steve at that time, you could move these around. I'm not sure if that's still the case. Best option is to order the correct size hinge so that you don't have to cut it at all, or you only have to cut a little tiny bit. But just be mindful of these. Do not ever cut past them. All right, so now we're going to center the hinge up a little bit. Perfectly centering the hinges on the gap is ideal, but not always possible. The hinge can have some overhang on the door and still operate just fine. You saw that in the select hinge video. The pivot point for the door was here, and the pivot point for the hinge was plumb out here. That's okay. It's still going to work just fine. It's just a matter of aesthetics and strength. The more centered you can get the actual pivot to the actual pivot on the door or the gap, the better. The only requirement is you must have at least 7/8 of an inch that is mounted to the frame. So you have to have 7/8 of an inch of that hinge that's mounted onto the frame to give it enough bite and enough strength to maintain its integrity. If you don't, then it's going to cause too much pressure on that hinge and you'll have screws rip out. You could possibly bend the hinge. There's a lot of bad things that can happen. The hinge will even work at an angle. I mean, you can put that hinge on, if you've got trim and brick and molding and stuff that's not even, you don't have to have the hinge perfectly even. It just looks better aesthetically that way. And if you can get it that way, that's the best option. If you can't, it's not the end of the world. Start off with a self tapper on this side. Number 3 Phillips head bit impact driver does excellent work. Okay. And so then now what I want to do is come to the bottom, make sure that you have the bottom lined up and put a screw or a self tapper down in the bottom. Make sure that you have it lined up directly on the center. Okay, you got the center on the center.
Feels good. Looks
And
good.
because you're at an awkward position.
That's not the center, is it?
No.
No.
Well, I
This
don't
is
know.
the door.
Move the hinge. Move the hinge the other way.
One thing that I'll do is I'll actually mark on the threshold with pencil or a little bit of Sharpie or something, or you can just make a little scratch on there where that center point is. Because a lot of the times the situation that we see right now, the hinge is going to cover up the center point. You're not going to be able to see where it's at. Okay. So that bottom mark is going to give you an indication as to where the center, where the door and the frame come together. Okay. The other way. That is the center. See it?
I guess so, huh?
Or is it?
Yeah, well, because
Is it or is it?
it is. I was
Okay.
following something else on the door. I'm sorry.
So what I would do is get up here somewhere straight where you're going to have a straight shot at putting that in there. So it doesn't roll around on you.
Just so it doesn't do that.
So it doesn't do that.
Gotcha.
Okay. Need another 4 hands.
Yeah.
Is it still on the center?
Yep.
Okay,
Looks good.
just pop all the rest of them in. That's it.
Okay, so making sure that it's centered is going to be very important, and making sure that you center punch, like you get your first self-tapping screw in on the top. And I like to pre-drill them. I personally, when you're that close to glass and you've got that much pressure, on the drill, it's going to make your life a lot easier if you pre-drill all of these holes. I like to use an automatic punch to punch the center so the drill bit doesn't wander around. But that's a personal preference, up to you. Making sure that your center punch goes in the center of the hole is going to prevent the hinge from creaking. If you've ever walked into a door or installed a continuous hinge and the door is really creaky, open and shut, it just sounds really unhappy. It's because whoever installed it, just zipped the self-tapping screws in, and they didn't take time to center them on the hole. So one's pulling the hinge this way just a little bit, just a fraction of an inch, and this one's pulling the hinge this way a fraction of an inch. This one's in the middle, then this one's pulling it this way again, and this one's pulling it even further this way. And then this one, routed all the way down to the bottom over here and pulled it this way. Now your hinge is like this. That's bad. That's why you hear all of those creaking noises, because it's in a terrible bind. Center punching the holes is the magic key to not having that happen. Here's what it looks like. You've got the center line centered directly on the center pivot point of the gear hinge. Again, we could move it over this way if we needed to. It's possible. It will work. It's just not ideal. Okay. And then as far as your 7/8 go, that's probably somewhere right in here. So you have to have at least this portion on the frame side. But sometimes you can't use a continuous hinge because this brick or some kind of trim will come almost all the way right to the edge and there's not enough room. Those are bad times. All right, so we're going to attach the hinge and drill the holes. The self-tapper screws are pretty self-explanatory. They're going to go in first on the hinge side first, or the frame side of the hinge first, frame side first. After we get that, a Milwaukee step bit can drill out most material of the door fast for your pre-drilling, okay? You're going to mark the step bit with a piece of tape so it doesn't over-drill the holes. The through holes, these are the through holes for the barrel nuts that I'm talking about. Countersunk self-tappers go on the frame side of the hinge, and the panhead screws, or the round-headed ones, you only have 4 of those, go on the door side. An automatic center punch will help the screw from wandering while it gets the bolt started. So again, automatic punch is going to help in making sure that it's centered in the hole.
And you'll have to address it. Now I am attaching the hinge on the frame side. Just putting it into position, attaching the self-tapping screws, making sure that everything is correctly lined up, making sure your measurements are right, and making sure your pivot point is correct. Making sure that you are not covering up anything that you do not want to cover up, like the weather stripping that we just removed with the multi-tool.
Okay, so you see there, we've got the tapered screws on the hinge side and the panhead screws on the door side. Okay. Take a moment and measure to see if the door sweep is going to be causing any problems and trying to overlap under the hinge. You can do one of 2 things. I personally think it looks more professional to have the hinge run all the way down to the bottom. So I will choose to cut the door sweep so that it's not overlapping. But you could also cut the hinge short enough so that it stays on top of the door sweep. Either way, you're going to have to make a cut. Use a multi-tool. Go ahead and cut this. Weather stripping is just going to get in the way later. And it is truly amazing how much that little tiny piece of stripping at the bottom of the door there can really just mess up a hinge install. Super handy tool to have. Okay, so now we're going to drill the door side. The round head self-tapper screws go on in the smaller holes on the door side. These hold the door in place for drilling through bolts. Test the swing of the door before permanently fixing the through bolts through. That is the point of the self-tapping screws. This is your Hail Mary. This is your last chance. Once you drill those through bolts through, it is extremely difficult to adjust that door, practically impossible. I've had to do it one time again because an employee installed it wrong. And we actually had to lift that door a little bit higher after they were done. And what we did is we actually had to pull the frame side non-removable cap and actually lift the door back up and re-drill and re-taper all of those holes so that we had that extra little quarter inch or whatever it was that we needed. But somehow that door sagged. Something happened when they did it and it just didn't work out right. But anyways, don't get to that point is what I'm saying. Test the door with the self-tapping screws before you drill the through bolts, and then you won't have that problem. Start off with a self-tapper on this side. Number 3 Phillips head bit, impact driver does. Okay. And so then now what I want to do is come to the bottom, make sure that you have the bottom lined up and put a screw or self-tapper down in the bottom. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the frame side again. Yep. There we go. The flathead bolts are going to be the ones that go into these. And then the bigger ones are going to be for the through bolts. Okay, so yeah, we got to have the flat ones or the round topped ones on that side. All right, so once we have those in, we will test swing the door. Last chance to make any adjustments. After the screws are fastened tight, the door side has 4 self-tapping round head screws in place. Remove the shim and the airbags to test the door. This is the time for adjustments. That time is now. Once the through bolts are drilled through, you're not going to be able to really adjust that door, not without painstakingly long solutions to that. A 3/8 drill bit drills the through bolts all the way through the door. All right, so now that we have all of the bolts on this side and the self-tappers on this side, all the way up this door, we can now release the airbags and we'll see if the door swings properly. This is the moment of truth. Okay.
And you have the key for it?
Yep. So we can't really do that until, and we'll pull all the shims and everything. Okay. See, it just drops that little bit. The truth, go ahead and unlock and open the door. Right, pull that shim out of the top, that wood bit. Okay. Thing of beauty. Swings properly, sits properly. That's what we're looking for. Okay. That's exactly what we want. Everything is out of the way. Okay, we'll adjust the door closer so it closes a little smoother. But other than that, that's exactly what we want. Now we'll just use that. We'll use the step bit to get these because I think it just works faster and easier.
Yeah.
On the aluminum, just get them started. If you start to get into this, back off. Okay. And then we'll use another bit to go all the way through. And that's where center punch helps.
I'm just doing upward pressure.
Go, go, go,
I'm
go,
afraid to get into
go, go,
that.
go. Stop. Okay, that's fine. We'll come back and we'll clean it out with the 3/8 bit, but that's gonna get, see how much faster that was? It's swapping bits out and doing all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. You need a center punch? There you go. Use a center punch. They give you those janky ones. Okay, so you can see how the center punch is definitely going to help. When she started running the bit, it ran to the bottom of the hole. She was able to counter that by lifting up on it, but that's definitely not going to be ideal. Use the center punch first. You can either use the step bit that was shown, or and the nice part about the step bit is that it starts the pilot bit out small and expands gradually. The other way that I've done it is start off with a 1/4 inch bit and then jump up to the 3/8. Either way works really, really fast. One way you're swapping bits back and forth. The other way you don't have to do that. And right here, we've got our bit. Tech tip is to wrap a piece of tape around right here, just some electrical tape. That way you're not going to be able to see this tiny little mark as you're drilling in. You can see the tape no matter what. Now we're going to install the through bolts. The secure side of the door is the side with the locking mechanism on the door. Place the round part of the through bolts facing the secure part of the door, unless you're on a facility that needs both sides to be secured, in which case you can alternate the bolts back and forth. So you have a round on one side, a round on the other, round, 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 and it goes back and forth. That way you're secure off of both sides. Okay. That would be for mental institutions, correctional facilities, drug rehab centers, anywhere where you have the potential, there's a potential for somebody to tamper with that. The other thing you could do is you could put all of the screws, you could put the round, you could put it backwards. You would put the round side on the non-secure side of the door, and then you'd put the Phillips head under the cap, and then you'd actually use pin-in Torx security screws to secure that cap down so that they can't take anything off of there. I would always recommend, anytime I'm on a correctional facility or anywhere where there's security like that, or a rehab center, flipping the bolts back and forth. Flipping the bolts back and forth is going to be a really, really, really good option for that. All right. Normally, this will be under the cap on the exterior part of the hinge for correctional facilities and mental health facilities. You can flip the Phillips head under the external part of the door for the hinge. That's going to be covered by the cap, or flip them back and forth. Okay. And then secure that cap down with pin-in Torx screws. And here we're going to be drilling the through bolts through, or the holes for the through bolts. I personally like to use the unibit. I think it hogs the material out quickly. I also like to use a 1/4 inch bit to start, and then finish up with 3/8 bit if I don't have a unibit available, or a step bit. Seems like the unibit or step bit removes the most amount of material the fastest. Using it, you can go directly to the 3/8 bit, but I do find that they're, number one, they're more expensive, and B, it just takes way longer, way more force, way more pressure to get the hole that's desired, as opposed to pre-drilling it with a smaller bit. If you go too small, then you have the possibility of breaking the bit, and you do not. Okay, get all those through bolts drilled all the way through. Then we're going to want to make sure that they all line up real nice and straight. This is not what you want. This one's kind of cocked off at an angle a little bit. this is what you want. Perfectly aligned through bolt, ready for the Phillips head bolt to come through. Okay. So I'll actually take the time and take a screwdriver and go through every single one of them, or a little piece of metal or whatever you have, stab something in there, align it properly. This step is going to save you time so that you don't cross thread one of these bolts. Once you cross thread one of these, it's going to be a nightmare for you, especially if you're trying to do it by yourself. Okay. Do not want to have to cross thread one of these if you're trying to do it by yourself. Through bolts and barrel bolts. If the through bolts get cross-threaded, you will have a very, very bad day. Make sure they are as straight as possible, and then you won't have that problem. Using a probe or screwdriver is key part to preventing the cross-threading. Okay, now we're going to come back. The step bit just makes it really nice to get a lot of material out of the way really, really fast without having to change bits. And it's also a lot more stout than a smaller 1/4-inch bit, so you don't chance breaking it. This bit right here is going to go, this is a 3/8 bit in the impact driver. We're going to make it the final size so we do not go too big and go all the way through the door. Pretty soon, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another set of those, and they're just going to be for aluminum, and that way they stay sharp. Key to this is making sure you stay really, really straight, because the 2 bolts have to come together and meet in the middle. No, I do not want to open that. Okay, you're going to make sure that all of your through bolts are fully seated. All the round heads should be flat with no gaps showing. If a through bolt is spinning, you can use vice grips to hold it while using an impact driver to suck it down. Okay, so that means you can clamp the vice grips on the outside. You can do it by yourself on the inside. Go ahead and use that impact driver as it's trying to hold that still, and it'll suck it up the last little bit of the way. If you got one that's not seating properly, go outside, tap the round side with the hammer, come back in, hit it with the impact driver. Do that do that back and forth, alternating, and eventually it'll come back down. You can use a hammer to tap the ribs back you can use the hammer to tap the ribs back into the hole as the impact driver is going if you have 2 people, but that's a luxury with 2 people. Do not break the bolt. That's going to be a really, really bad time. Do not damage the door by over tightening and warping the door. These impact drivers today have so much torque that you can literally put waves in the door by those through bolts. So don't do that. All right, so a couple things to keep in mind when you're mounting this. On this application, they're going to be perfectly fine with the secure side being on the outside, meaning that the round sex bolt, the round head of the sex bolt is on the outside. That way, if they come and strip this piece off, you can't come and unscrew them, right? And that's going to leave this bolt on that side. When we do this at a correctional facility or we do it at a mental health facility, you want to do it the opposite way. And then alternate back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Alternating is the key for double-sided security. Because that strip is going to be on there, you can actually order these with a pin-in Torx. So it's a security pin-in Torx. And you also take a pin-in Torx and you actually screw the cap on in 3 different places. That way the cap can't be peeled so that people can get access to the hinges and break out. That's how you make it a more secure system. So the normal way is this way. That's why the bolts are colored. They're meant to be on the inside. These are not colored. So if you mounted it this way, it wouldn't match. That's the perfect indicator right there. So go ahead and basically I just tap all those in. And if you did it right,
they're going to hit perfectly to where those ribs actually catch.
Just a little bit of metal.
That's okay. But that's what you want. You want those ribs to catch. If those ribs don't catch, you're going to have a long, hard, miserable day trying to be on both sides. And the whole point of this is to do it by yourself. So you need to push these in, make sure they go in flat. I would try and tap them in as much as possible. And then go ahead and like that one's facing up. So you're going to want to try and move that around. Then when you go in on the other side, take something like your screwdriver or whatever you have, jam it in there and straighten it out before you put the bolt in. Okay?
Cool.
So if these get stuck, you can put a pair of vice grips on here, or you can try and beat it back in and make sure those ribs grab. If you have two people, or you can grab somebody, tapping on this side with the hammer and impact driving the other side with the screwdriver is going to help out a lot. Other than that, just make sure that they're all flush and tight all the way down. And then my favorite is 18-volt impactor driver. The 12-volt doesn't have enough umph. And then a number 3 bit.
Okay, so this is what the 3 bolts or barrel nuts or 6 bolts should look like, whatever you want to call them. Nice and flat, nice and flat. If you don't get them flat, that cap won't go on because they'll be sticking up and you can't get the cap back on. Installing the 2 screw cover caps. So this is going to show an installation of the removable cover on the door side.
So the last part of the equation is getting this block snapped on, or the outer bit snapped on. This one has the Allen heads. Make sure you pull those off. Then this should clip on fairly easily. If you need to tap it on, go ahead and do so. This is where if you're in a secured facility or mental institution or correctional facility, you would want pin-in Torx and pin-in Torx these down several screws. That way this cap can't be peeled off. And the same with this cap over here. That way they can't access this here and just pull the door off. But a 2-inch or 1-inch by 2-inch block of oak wood, along with a regular hammer or dead blow hammer, is going to be your friend getting this on. It takes a little bit to get it on there. So.
Okay, and then like I said, a block of oak and a dead blow hammer on the non-removable side. You're going to have to hit that side a little bit harder to get it to seat properly.
Give it a tap. Get it off. Yeah, don't be scared. No, no. Here, I'll hold this. Okay. If it's easier to get the regular camera, there you go. See, it's flat.
Nice.
Okay, just little by little. There you go. You got to smack the crap out of it pretty hard.
Yeah.
This is also why we use a select hinge, continuous hinge, because that piece is extra thick and extra heavy duty. So when you're doing this part with some of the other hinges, it can become bent. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You'll also notice the rubber hammer or a plastic hammer, a dead blow hammer like this is going to initiate more shock. So when you hit, it's going to, those beads are going to move forward and carry momentum. That's the entire point of it. It's also not metal. So if you miss and hit the glass, you don't have an oh no moment. Okay. I'm not saying that if you hit this hammer on the glass, that there's no possible way that it can break. I'm just telling you there's a heck of a lot less chance of it breaking than if you hit it with a metal hammer. A metal hammer would almost certainly, if you gave it enough force to seat that cap and missed and hit either the hinge, causing a big ding and an ugly scar, or the glass, it would almost certainly break.
See it.
And you can pretty much tell when it's flat.
Easy killer. Then you're probably going to want to get more of an underhand swing to get the bottom of it. You know what I mean? Kind of stand up over it and bring the hammer into it. There you go. This one's really funky. Normally you'd be able to just kind of hit it directly. But see how that piece of oak handles that really nicely, as opposed to all those shims taped together, you bust them all up. All right, just double check it, make sure that you can feel. I run my finger all along here and make sure that it's all the way done. Again, if it's a secure facility, you need to do pinning torques, self tappers up and down, line your screws out. I would just put 3.
Right, drive 'em right in.
1, 2, 3. Yeah. And then if we were doing that, I would mark out in between 2 of where 2 of my screws are, so you don't go in and hit a screw.
So,
Got it?
I
Cool.
like that.
Cool. All righty, now the job is completed and we never pulled the door. Open the door, close the door. Grab your Phillips head and pull that top pivot off, and that's it. We are done. Beautiful. Amazing. Wonderful. And we never, ever, ever had to pull the door. Very cool. Okay. So hopefully you guys get the concept of that. Once we pull that top pivot out, so you open up the door, there's 3 screws that are going to be right here, 1, 2, and 1 in the middle. Take those 3 screws out, that entire pivot pops out of there. And it leaves a hole like this. Now, I don't like leaving a hole like this because I just don't think it looks professional. It also gives a spot for critters, bugs and rodents and things like that to get in. We don't want to do that, especially if it's on a restaurant. So these stickers from Professional Business Products do a really nice job of covering that hole up. They make these thick high top jelly stickers, and they also make an aluminum sticker that goes on there as well. That's actual metal. Plus, it puts your advertising back on there. So if they have a problem with this door in the future and they look up here and they're like, hey, who do we call to service this door? Boom, your name, phone number, everything that you do is all right then and there. Now, on the subject of mental health institutions and rehab centers and correctional facilities, the Tippet is the only anti-ligature hinge cover that I am aware of for a continuous hinge. Notice it uses pin-in torques to stabilize it, and then basically it keeps anybody from kind of hanging anything on there. That's what anti-ligature is, so people can't commit suicide or hurt somebody else either way. But it doesn't give them anything, a sharp edge or anything to hook anything onto. So this little tippet goes on there, and then you can't put anything over it, and it makes it ligature resistant. All right. We're going to think outside the box a little bit here. We can change a center hung concealed mounted door closer to a outswing door. This is going to be an easy replacement with external mounted closer. So what happened was this ski resort approached me and they're like, look, we're tired of putting these closers in every 2 to 3 or 4 years at the most. The number one problem that they have is at a ski resort facility, you've got a hydraulic closer in that center mount, and it gets cold. It gets freezing cold. It's like right in the middle, but it stays really, really cold because it's not on the inside of the door all the way. So the oil changes viscosity, and they're very difficult to keep, in balance and keep the sweep and the door closing in line. They also tend to blow out a lot. They tend to leak. They tend to get loose, and they tend to have a lot of issues. The bottom bearing also gets a lot of moisture under it, and salt. They're always spreading salt and stuff around, is highly corrosive. So they wanted a solution to not have to redo and spend $400, $500, $600 or more replacing that closer or that bottom bearing every 4 or 5 years. Okay. So I told him, I was like, yes, we can do that. We got permission from the fire marshal first. Anytime you change the operation of a door, you're going to need to talk to your fire marshal or your building inspector to make sure that it's okay and get it in writing. Nothing means anything over the phone. Get it in writing. Then we're going to take this double swing door and we're going to make it an outswing only so that it complies with the building code requirements and whatnot. But we're going to have a continuous hinge on it, and we're going to put a conventional door closer inside. That way they can change the closer out much more rapidly. Their staff can take out 4 screws or 6 screws and replace it very easily. And we don't have to put those Jackson closers in there every time. Wayne here with Tri-County Locksmith Service, and today we're going to be taking a center hung concealed door closer that has a center bearing and a center mounted closer up here, and we're going to adjust this and we're going to bring it out here. We're going to mount a continuous hinge flush on the outside, and then we're going to mount a conventional closer on the inside. So we're actually going to convert this from a double swing door that swings both ways to one that only swings out. Anytime you do this, you want to check with your local fire code, your fire marshal, and building inspector. But for the most part, this will be a really nice solution. It should last a lot longer. You can see these closers are all blown out. So we're going to fix that. Here you can see that we begin the process. We're going inside, and your center hung or concealed door closers will usually have a side arm or a rear arm attachment. There will be between 2 and 3 Allen head screws that hold a block onto the arm that is attached to the door, where the block slides onto the square pivot for the center hung door closer. We now have the door pulled. This is a scenario where it will be advised you will have to pull the door down. This will not be a scenario where you can just pin the door in place. You can pin the door in place after you get the door pulled. However, with this scenario, we found one of the doors actually had the concealed closer that was not even attached. It was hanging on by a thread, and it quite literally almost came down on us when we pulled that particular plate off of there. So it is always advised, remove the concealed closer and the bottom bearing so that you don't have any trip hazards or any other kind of potential hazards moving forward later on. We now have the door moved out of the way, and Matt is going to start putting the continuous hinge on the frame side. Notice always the frame goes, or the continuous hinge frame side is always the small self-tapping screws. I go over this many times in the class that I teach. However, even so, on this very building, not these doors, but a separate set of doors, another so-called glass company or door specialist installed the exact same hinge and the exact same door closers that we're installing. They just managed to install them backwards. They installed the self-tapping screws on the door side and then refused to put through bolts on the frame side. It never goes that way. It loses a tremendous amount of strength, and it loses all of the properties that make it a quality product. You have to put the through bolts through the door on the door side. That is the strongest way to do it. So we have the door mounted with 2 people. It's very, very easy, very, very nice, very convenient, and it matches up well. We're probably drilling the through bolts through now. Again, we just set the door aside, get the bearing cut out of the way. I used an angle grinder to cut the bottom pivot bearing as it was seized to the floor. We tried to unscrew it and thread it out. It was not having any of that. This having a high corrosive environment. This is a ski resort company, and there is lots of moisture and snow and salt and chemicals used in this area. We got the floor cleaning chemicals on the inside and the salt and whatnot that goes on the sidewalk outside to melt the ice to keep people safe. So we have a very, very large amount of corrosion and just bad stuff going on here. So we did the best we could. We had to cut the bottom pivot out, remove the top closer. We're now doing it on the other side as well. Door is now out of the way. We did have to, this side, the side where we now have the continuous hinge mounted has flush bolts. So we just used a round drill bit instead of the usual square hole. Hard to make a square hole. You could do it if you needed to,
However, I see no issues in using a round hole to be able to reset that. So we re-drill the flush bolt top and bottom so that it can maintain security. And now we're working on mounting the continuous hinge on the opposing door. The way the doors lock together is not going to change in any way, shape, or form because both doors are being moved out together. You would not be able to mount a continuous hinge on a double door setup like this if you were only doing one side. The doors will no longer meet. Here we have Matt drilling through bolts angle. Penetrating through with a 3/8 drill bit. Everything is done with cordless tools. Makes it very, very nice and convenient. We also added Norton. I believe they were 1600 series door closers on the inside. So we changed from a center hung concealed mounted closer to a externally mounted exposed door closer. It seemed to be the long-term solution for these high traffic doors. They have replaced the center mounted closers and bearings twice before and wanted a more long-term solution. My personal opinion, Select Hinge guarantees 63 million opens or some number close to that. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but they guarantee a lot of opens on their openings. So that's why we switched it to that. You can see there's the top gone. I showed a picture of the bottom bearing being cut and gone. And then this is the area after we're done. I take pictures to show that we are cleaning up after ourselves. I always take pictures to make sure there's no aluminum shavings anywhere and that we document that. That way, if it ever comes back that somebody got hurt, slipped, injured, got stabbed, little kids get into shavings and things like that, this creates a lot of hazardous environments. So make sure you document that the job was done right, done well, and cleaned up afterwards. I post these all in my invoice that I send directly to the customer via QuickBooks. And I also make notes. There is no hesitation and no problem proving this later. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so hopefully you got an idea there and kind of opens your mind. Even though you have a door that swings both ways, you can still utilize a continuous hinge. Okay, that's going to be the best way to do it, in my opinion. You could keep replacing those jacks and closers, but in the environment, given the situation, short of replacing all of the doors and frames, this was about the best option that we came up with. I also installed a continuous hinge on a walk-in freezer for an emergency repair. I'll just show this video briefly so you can kind of see what we did here. Anytime I run into a situation where we have a hinge issue, I try and apply a continuous hinge. They just work amazing. Okay, so here is the hinge that comes with the refrigerator. Everything was broken. Everything, the hinges, the poly pieces on the inside, the pins, the parts that attach the hinge to the wall and the door itself, everything was broken on this. It was literally just being dragged around on the floor for who knows how long. I mean, this was one of the craziest installs we've ever seen. The importance of this particular install is that if we didn't get this done ASAP right here, right now, that it was hanging on by a thread. This was hanging on by a thread. So if we didn't get this done right here, right now, and get this fixed, and we live in a small town, I don't have time to order these parts and order custom parts for this thing. I have to fix it now. They're literally getting ready to dump the food into wheelbarrows and start taking it to the hotel's freezer because they can't keep their freezer secure anymore. Okay, so major, major emergency. This was on a weekend. This job definitely paid very well, but it was also a unique adaptation of this continuous hinge. Here, broken there, completely gone. Bearing. One of the most difficult parts about this install is the stainless steel skin. If you're going to be installing in stainless steel, you're going to need to have fresh drill bits and probably carbide drill bits. The regular drill bits are going to get chewed up pretty quick. You might be able to get 1 or 2 holes through there with a really sharp, brand new cobalt or titanium bit or HSS or high-speed steel bit. However, having carbide on the truck is going to help immensely. Those multi-material bits that have the hex shank on them that come in the different sizes, those are going to be your best friend to at least get a pilot hole in there.
Refrigerator.
Once you get the pilot hole in, the self-tapping screw will go ahead and chew that out and drill itself into it.
Door. All the hardware was completely broke, busted, snapped, clipped clean off. So we're going to install a continuous hinge, surface mount on the outside. Should hold this thing up just fine. Got all the old hardware off. Just need to be aware of this guy up here. That's kind of a closing, old close device. So puff it up and shim it, and we should be good to go. Alrighty, so we got the door.
This will also be one of those rare instances where we can only utilize self-tapping screws. The door is not a standard thickness like a standard door is. So the self-tapping screws going through the stainless steel is our only option. The through bolts are simply too long. They're too big. They won't work.
Door shimmed and stabilized. We've got a nice reveal around the whole thing here, here, and here. We've got that engaged the way that it's supposed to be. And then we've got a decent gap here, making sure that the door stays sealed. And then the airbags on the bottom pin the door into place. Now that it's nice and secure, couldn't move the door if you really wanted to. Everything's pinned in place. So we'll go ahead and attach the continuous hinge. I measured from here to here to the bottom. I think that's all we need. The door's really light. So we should be able to just bolt this thing right on. Alrighty, so we got our 67. 67 is our measurement. That's going to be extremely short because it's not a normal door. It's a refrigerator door. So once again, we just need to pay extra uber attention. If you cut off of one side, we would be cutting one of these bearings off. So we either need to move the bearing or make 2 cuts. I'm choosing to make 2 cuts. So that way I'm going to split the difference. My cut's going to be here. And then my second bearing is here. My second cut is going to be here, saving the last hole. So you need to be uber mindful of these bearings here. That's where all the strength comes from and keeps the door from, or the hinge from slipping. So I'm just going to make 2 cuts, nice, quick and easy. Milwaukee saw, boom, boom, done. Alrighty, so again, we have no security risk on this door. It's just for utilitarian purposes. So we've used all self-tappers on both sides. Screws are all in, everything's on there, and we're going to test it and see if it swings. We're looking at the top ball here. Make sure that this is like a closing device to make sure that it seals. Looking at everything in here. Okay. Shuts nice. Seals. Closes. In here. Voila. Freaking amazing. Beautiful. That worked out awesome. Continuous hinge is definitely a viable source. Just make sure that you check your lines. Make sure there's no fluid lines or any kind of condenser lines or anything like that, but this unit's all up there. So this thing is good to go. That's nicely.
Okay, there you have it. So that's one of those weird instances where, hey, you know, we were taking something that's not meant to actually work on that and making it work on it, and it worked beautifully. A couple other instances and a couple other things I'm going to go over. These classes can be a little bit long on video, so I'm trying to chop these down into like 1 and 2 hour segments. So hopefully we're staying within about 2 hours on this one, maybe just a little bit slightly over. I just wanted to post those videos so you could get a little bit more in touch with what's possible. Okay. And don't just get boxed into one idea that it has to be this way. And if it's not set up this way, then you can't do it. Okay. But now that the job is complete, we can check for any other issues like, door closer issues. Always be ready for an upsell. Adam's right locking mechanism. Are your cylinders working properly? Do they need to be lubricated? Do they fit properly? Are they aligned properly? Do your paddles work? Exit devices? All those different things. Turn this job into your foot in the door to fixing any of these other projects or any of these other things. I often ask people, hey, when's the last time you rekeyed? How many people still have your keys? Are you interested in electronic access? Would you like an electronic lock on this door? We can do all of those things. And usually they will actually take you up on some of those suggestions and you'll get more work for it. Okay. So we get paid and move on to the next one. A lot of people ask me how much I get paid for these or how much I charge. I usually charge about $650. So if you figure that it's now May 2022, if this hinge costs, these hinge usually cost me between $125 and $150, depending on the length and the style. That leaves about $500 an hour. And I can install these in 20 minutes. The fastest I've done is 20 minutes. So I can literally make over $500 an hour. If we do multiple hinges, like if we do more than 2 or 3 of them, I'll cut people a price break and I'll knock the price down to about $500. But still, you're still making extremely good money doing this. That's literally $500 an hour, people. That is extremely good money. Okay. Teach your employees how to do them, however you want to do it. This is money in the bank all day long. And for some reason, a lot of glass companies just manage to butcher these things. They don't understand you have to put the 3 bolts through. And so they just use self-tapping screws and then the door falls apart and then you get the call to come clean up their mess. So take advantage of it. Here it is, all nice and shiny and pretty and done. City Hall, all ready to go. Continuous hinge. That's the one that you saw us installing earlier. Okay. Thank you to Select Hinge and Select Hinge products. And Steve, he actually went through this class with me. I got this approved through him. So I made sure that we ran through this with the manufacturer to make sure that they were actually on board with it. You've heard Wayne's Lock Shop mentioned a couple times. So Wayne's Lock Shop is training videos. You have the opportunity to go ahead and scan this QR code and apply today. So go ahead and put your phone up, scan this QR code, fill out an application, and simply for filling out an application, you'll get a 7-day free trial to check out the website. All of the small individual videos that you saw posted today are in Wayne's Lock Shop. If you just want to go over 1 or 2 of those, this entire class is posted in Wayne's Lock Shop as well, along with many other classes. So if you like this class, go ahead and check out wayneslockshop.com, fill out an application, browse around. There's a tech form. You can post pictures, ask questions. I will personally help you there along with other members of the website. Thank you so much and have a great day. Don't forget to stick around for part 2. This is actually part 1. So don't forget to stick around for part 2. Part 2, I show you how to do this on metal doors with butt hinges. I show you how to do, how to put screws in the frame side if there's concrete filled doors. So don't forget to watch part 2 as well. There's a whole nother section on how to deal with butt hinges, how to do the exact same thing. We're going to cut the hinges off. I'm going to show you how to do that without wearing out your blades or without, causing extra stress on you or the machines. There's very tricky little specific things that you have to do in order to do this, but it's the same idea. Big oversized doors don't need to be pulled to be able to install this hinge and blow out your back or get hurt or damage the door or any property around you. For more information, check out wayneslockshop.com. Thank you so much for watching and have yourself a wonderful day.